U.S. Coast Guard helicopter hovers over a remote, tropical island. The blades kicking up sand and salt spray. The pilot spots 4 figures on the beach below. Usually, survivors are screaming, waving their arms, desperate for a rope. But these 4 are different. They are sitting in a perfect circle, motionless, staring at something buried in the sand. As the rescue team descends, the scene gets weirder. The survivors, Caleb, Sarah, Mike, and Emily, aren't sunburnt or starving. They are covered in a fine, shimmering gold dust. Their skin glitters under the tropical sun, and when they finally look up, their eyes are unnaturally bright, almost metallic. A rescuer reaches out to grab Caleb's shoulder to lead him to the winch, but Caleb doesn't move. Instead, he snarls like a cornered animal and pulls a heavy object from his back. It's a human skull, but it isn't bone. It's solid, jagged, 24-karat gold. "We aren't leaving," Caleb whispers, his voice sounding like grinding metal. "The gold isn't finished with us yet." They were missing for 40 days. The world thought they were dead. But when the rescue finally arrived, the survivors fought back. They didn't want to be saved, because they found something more valuable than life itself. But on this island, gold doesn't grow in mines or rivers. It grows in the bones of the living. How did a group of best friends turn into the violent guardians of a cursed treasure? It all began 40 days ago, with a single discovery, in a cave of light. The trip was supposed to be a reset for all of them, a way to escape the pressures of a failing world. Caleb, a failed entrepreneur who had lost everything to bad investments, needed a win. Sarah, a quiet history teacher, wanted an adventure. Mike, a fitness influencer obsessed with perfection, and Emily, a nurse who had seen too much death, just wanted peace. But when their boat capsized during a sudden storm, their reset turned into a fight for survival. They washed up on a nameless island, soaked and shivering. But their fear turned to awe when they followed a stream behind a massive waterfall, and found the entrance to a cave. Inside, the world changed. The walls weren't made of damp rock. They were jagged veins of pure, 24-karat gold. But this wasn't the cold, hard metal found in jewelry stores. When Caleb touched the wall, he jumped back. The gold was warm. It felt like it had a pulse, a slow, rhythmic thrumming that vibrated through their fingertips. "This can't be real," Sarah whispered, her historian's mind racing. "Gold doesn't grow like this." As they moved deeper, the air became thick and sweet. It didn't smell like a damp cave, it smelled like the most expensive perfume, like success, like everything they had ever wanted. It was a biological lure, a scent that bypassed their logic and went straight to their primitive brains. This was gold fever, but it wasn't just greed. It was a physical attraction, a hunger that made their stomachs growl. In the center of the main chamber, sitting on a natural pedestal of sparkling quartz, was a human skull. It was beautiful, solid, shimmering gold. But as Sarah leaned in to examine it, her professional curiosity turned to pure horror. "Look at the teeth," she gasped. The skull didn't have the worn-down teeth of an ancient tribal king. It had modern dental work, a porcelain crown and a silver filling. This wasn't an artifact from a lost civilization. This was someone who had arrived here recently. Someone who had been transformed. Who cares who it was? Mike laughed, his eyes glazed with a strange, metallic sheen. "Look at this place. We're billionaires. We don't ever have to worry about the real world again." Mike reached down and picked up a heavy gold coin that was lying near the pedestal. It was thick and ancient, but the moment his skin touched the metal, something went wrong. The gold didn't just sit in his hand. It began to melt, liquefying into a shimmering, glowing mercury that seeped into his pores. "Mike, drop it," Emily shouted, her medical instinct screaming at her. But Mike didn't drop it. He didn't even flinch. He watched in fascination as the gold climbed up his index finger, turning the skin, the nail, and the bone into solid, unmoving metal. He tried to bend his finger, but it was frozen, a golden statue attached to his hand. He didn't scream in pain. He didn't cry for help. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. "I don't feel hurt, Emily," he whispered, holding his glittering finger up to the light. "I feel strong. I feel powerful." The gold wasn't just a treasure they had found. It was a virus, and it had just found its next host. By day 10, the concept of time had become as blurred as their reflection in the golden walls. The basic needs of survival, the desperate hunt for clean water, the search for coconuts or fish had simply stopped. Caleb sat by the cave entrance, staring at his palms. They were etched with golden lines, like a circuit board made of precious metal. He wasn't hungry. None of them were. They had realized that as long as they stayed within the cave, or kept their skin pressed against the warm veins of gold, their stomachs remained full. The island was feeding them, pumping a strange, metallic energy directly into their systems. The transformation wasn't staying inside the cave either. The environment was beginning to ascend. The tropical leaves on the trees near the entrance were no longer soft and green. They had become thin, razor-sharp sheets of gold that clinked in the wind. The stream that ran past their camp was shimmering with heavy, metallic flakes, turning the water into a slow-moving river of liquid stars. The island wasn't just a place, it was a process. Sarah, despite the growing fog in her mind, spent her days tracing the ancient carvings hidden behind the quartz pillars. Her fingers, now stiff and yellowed at the tips, moved over symbols of people turning into suns. "It's a living alchemist," she whispered, her voice sounding dry, like paper rubbing together. "The island doesn't just want treasure, it wants to preserve life, forever. But there's a price. To be preserved, you have to stop being organic. To live forever, you have to become a statue." Emily, the nurse, was the only one still fighting the lure. She looked at her friends with a horror that was slowly being replaced by a strange, shimmering peace. She tried to take Mike's pulse, but her fingers couldn't find a rhythm. His heart wasn't beating, it was thumping with a heavy, mechanical sound. When she checked his eyes with a small flashlight, the pupils didn't dilate. They reflected the light like polished mirrors. "Our blood, it's changing," Emily said, her voice trembling. "It's becoming heavy yellow. Our organs aren't failing, they're being replaced. Mike, your lungs, they're becoming a honeycomb of gold. If this doesn't stop, we won't be able to move by next week." "Why would I want to move?" Mike asked, his voice sounding deeper, more resonant. He flexed his golden arm, the muscle shimmering under the skin like a molten river. "I've never felt this perfect. I'm becoming permanent." The argument was cut short by a distant, low drone. It was the sound of a boat, a small fishing vessel, passing a few hundred yards off the coast. In any other disaster, this would be the moment of salvation. They would run to the beach, light a fire, scream until their throats were raw. But Caleb and Mike didn't run. They didn't even stand up. Instead, they instinctively crouched low in the golden brush, their eyes narrowing as they watched the boat move across the horizon. There was no hope in their expressions, only a dark, jagged suspicion. "They'll see the light," Caleb hissed, his golden fingers digging into the earth. "They'll see what we have. They'll try to take it." "They won't take our evolution," Mike whispered, his hand closing into a heavy, metallic fist. They weren't afraid of dying on a desert island anymore. They were afraid of being saved, because being saved meant going back to a world of flesh, and rot, and poverty. They were no longer survivors. They were guardians of a sickness that they had started to call a gift. As the gold moved deeper into their bodies, the bond between the four friends began to fracture. It wasn't the kind of fighting you'd expect from starving people. There were no arguments over food or water. Instead, a twisted, silent competition had taken hold. It was a beauty contest of the macabre. They spent hours staring at each other, comparing the shimmer of their skin, measuring how far the metallic stain had climbed up their necks. Mike's right arm was now entirely solid, from the shoulder to the fingertips. It was heavy, at least 40 pounds of dead weight, and completely useless for any kind of survival task. He couldn't lift a branch or help build a shelter, but he didn't care. He treated the limb like a trophy. He sat for hours on the beach, using fine, white sand to polish the metal until it mirrored the sun, blinding anyone who looked at him. "Look at the purity," he would mutter, his voice sounding more like a vibration than a human tone. "I'm winning. I'm almost there." But the true scale of their fate was hidden further back in the jungle. While exploring a ridge above the cave, Sarah stumbled into a hidden valley. She called it the Garden of Statues. There, standing among the golden-leaved trees, were dozens of people. Some were sitting, some were reaching toward the sky, and others were curled in a fetal position. They were the previous survivors, the ones who had come before the 1950s dental work skull. They were 100% gold. Their skin, their clothes, even the tears on their cheeks had been preserved in shimmering, 24-karat detail. The most terrifying part wasn't the metal, it was their faces. Every single statue was frozen in an expression of pure, terrifying ecstasy. They weren't victims of a curse, they were addicts who had finally reached the end. These were the sources of the golden skulls. Once the rest of the body eventually eroded or was claimed by the jungle, only the heavy, solid heads remained. Sarah, her own legs feeling like heavy lead pipes, realized the trap they were in. She sat on a golden rock and looked at her shins, where the veins were now glowing with a faint, internal light. "We can't leave, Emily," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been tracking the symptoms. The gold in our blood is kept in a liquid, energized state by the magnetic core of that cave. If we get on a boat, if we move even a mile away from this island, the magnetism will fade." "And then what?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with the last of her human fear. "The gold will harden," Sarah whispered. "Instantly. It won't be a slow transformation anymore. The moment we hit the open ocean, our hearts will turn into solid blocks of metal. Our lungs will become statues. We'll sink to the bottom of the sea like anchors. We aren't just survivors anymore, we are prisoners of the island's pulse." The gold fever had moved from their minds into their very biology. They were tethered to the island by their own blood. Emily walked back toward the cave, looking for Caleb. She found him hunched over the main gold vein, his back to her. He was making a strange, wet sound. When she got closer, she saw him plucking strands of his own hair and pressing them into the warm, pulsing metal of the wall. He was trying to plant himself, hoping the gold would travel up the follicles and turn his hair into shimmering, golden thread. "Caleb, we have to try to leave," she pleaded, her voice small. Caleb turned around slowly. His face was a mask of yellow-tinted skin, and when he opened his mouth to speak, there were no white teeth left. His gums had hardened, and his teeth had been replaced by solid, jagged gold pegs that glinted in the dim light. "Why would I leave, when I'm finally becoming beautiful?" The roar of the Coast Guard helicopter was a violent intrusion. To the pilots looking down, they saw 4 victims of a tragedy. But to the 4 friends sitting on the sand, the rescuers represented everything they had grown to loathe, the old world. They saw the rescuers' wrinkled skin, their tired eyes, and their fragile, fleshy bodies that were destined to rot and die. To be saved was no longer an act of mercy, it was a death sentence. When the first rescue team hit the beach, they expected tears and hugs. Instead, they were met with a wall of shimmering, silent aggression. Caleb stood up, his body moving with a heavy, mechanical stiffness. He was no longer a man of 160 pounds, the gold in his bones and tissues had tripled his weight. As a rescuer reached out to grab him, Caleb didn't flinch. He swung a heavy, solid gold skull like a mace. The impact was sickening, not the sound of bone on bone, but the sound of an anvil hitting a melon. The survivors had turned the island into a fortress of golden skulls. They had placed the heavy, metallic heads of previous victims in the tall grass as traps, and used them as blunt force weapons. The rescuers found that their batons and tasers were useless. The survivor's skin had become a natural armor, a gilded hide that barely felt pain. Every step Caleb took left deep, heavy footprints in the wet sand. He was a tank made of 24-karat meat. "Caleb, stop. It's me." A voice cried out over the roar of the rotors. Was Jason, Caleb's younger brother, who had joined the search party in desperation. He ran toward Caleb, his face wet with tears. "We thought you were gone. Mom is waiting, she's heartbroken. Please, just get in the chopper." Caleb paused, looking at his brother's face. In his old life, he would have been moved. But now, all he saw was decay. He looked at Jason's soft skin, the sweat dripping from his pores, the way his chest heaved with a frantic, weak breath. It looked disgusting. It looked temporary. Caleb held up his own hand, which was now a solid, unyielding claw of gold. "You're already dying?" "Jason," Caleb's voice vibrated, sounding like 2 coins rubbing together. "Why would I go back, to a world that smells like a grave?" Nearby, the scene turned into chaos. Mike, driven by a manic, golden energy, saw the helicopter as a threat to their sanctuary. He didn't want to leave, and he didn't want the island's secret to escape. He charged toward the hovering machine, his heavy, golden arms swinging wildly. He looked like a shimmering juggernaut, unstoppable and terrifying. But the physics of the new world were unforgiving. As Mike reached the edge of a tide pool, his massive weight betrayed him. He tripped on a slick, golden-encrusted rock. In his human life, he would have splashed into the water and swam back to shore. But Mike wasn't human anymore. He hit the water with a heavy, metallic thud. Because his body was now composed of more metal than flesh, he didn't bob to the surface. He sank instantly. He went down like a discarded anchor. his golden limbs pulling him into the dark, blue depths of the reef. The rescue divers jumped in after him, their flashlights cutting through the clear water. They saw him resting on the sandy bottom, 20 feet down. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't clawing for air. Mike was looking directly up at the surface, his white, metallic eyes wide and peaceful. A slow, golden smile spread across his face as the last of his air bubbles floated away. He was finally what he always wanted to be. He was permanent. He was a treasure at the bottom of the sea. The rescue team didn't leave because they wanted to. They left because they were terrified. Sarah, her movements now slow and heavy like a clockwork machine, had used a jagged piece of quartz to shred the helicopter's fuel lines while the crew was distracted by Caleb. The rescuers scrambled back into their battered craft, the pilot's eyes wide with a fear that went beyond words. They retreated into the sky, marking the island on their maps as hazardous, contaminated, forbidden. They left behind the three friends, and the memory of a man who sank like an anchor. As the sound of the rotors faded into the distance, a deep, shimmering silence returned to the beach. Caleb, Sarah, and Emily stood together as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The island didn't just reflect the sunset, it began to glow from within. Every golden leaf, every metallic stone, and every vein in their own skin pulsed with a blinding, rhythmic light. And then, the voices started. It wasn't a sound heard with the ears, it was a vibration felt in the marrow of their golden bones. It was a hive mind, a chorus of thousands of whispers, the collective consciousness of everyone who had ever ascended on this shore. They realized then that the island wasn't a natural formation. It was a seed, a piece of technology from a civilization that had died 1,000,000 years ago, a culture that had traded their flesh for the immortality of metal. The island was a living machine, and they were its latest harvest. We are many, the voices hummed through Caleb's mind. We are forever. Years passed. The world moved on, forgetting the contaminated zone in the middle of the ocean. But nature and greed always find a way. A small salvage boat, looking for wreckage after a storm, drifted near the forbidden coordinates. The crew grabbed their binoculars, staring at the shore of an island that seemed to be made of solid light. On the beach, they saw three figures. They were perfectly preserved, beautiful, and terrifying. They stood like statues, their golden skin polished to a mirror finish by the wind and sand. The sailors whispered about ancient gods, about miracles, about a treasure that could buy the world. But then, the final horror revealed itself. The figure in the middle, the one that used to be Sarah, tilted its head. A low, metallic creak echoed across the water. She wasn't a statue, not yet. She moved with an agonizing, graceful slowness, her gilded joints clicking. She reached down into the sand and picked up a heavy, solid gold human skull. She walked to the very edge of the tide line and placed the skull on a flat rock, facing the new boat. It was an invitation. It was a lure. It was the next guest list. Sarah looked out at the sailors, her eyes now two solid, brilliant diamonds of light. She didn't want their help. She wanted their company. They chose gold over life, and now they have both, forever. They didn't refuse rescue because they were crazy, they refused it because they were no longer human. They had become part of the machine, part of this seed that would eventually turn the whole world into a silent, glittering garden. If you found a cave that promised you'd never age, never hunger, and never feel pain, but you could never leave, would you take the first coin?